Hi everyone, welcome to Enjoy English School. I'm Stephen.
Hello, 大家好，我是 Bernice.
And today's date is September 25th. We're on day 2 of the same subject as yesterday, Spotlight on Taiwan, the juicy story behind Taiwan's favorite jelly.
好，我们今天的主题呢，跟之前还是一样，讲到发现台湾，我们台湾的这个国民美食爱玉，它的一个历史。
Please refer to pages 52 to 55.And I also want to mention the juicy story. Okay, so here we're actually saying juicy, like it's a lot of juice. There has a lot of juice inside of the 爱玉 jelly. But what we actually mean by a juicy story, it means that something that everybody will find very interesting.
对，没错。当我们用这个 juicy 啊，本来是多汁的嘛，形容这个食物。那我们形容这个 story 这个字的时候，感觉这个故事好像还有很多有趣的地方等待我们去发现。
Exactly. All right, so let's get started.
好的。
People in Taiwan began making 爱玉 jelly in the early 1800s.
我们现在来知道这个爱玉冻的历史到底是什么呢？我们在台湾呢，好的这群人他们开始制作这个爱玉冻的时间呢，是在19世纪的最初期。
Right, so if it was in the late 1800s, let's say maybe 1875 or 1886, we would say in the late 1800s. And maybe if it was like 1840 or 1850, 1860, we would say in the mid 1800s.
对，早中晚期。
Mid 就 MID， 不用讲 in the middle 1800s， 不会这样讲。然后像比如说1900年代会说 1900s， 1600是 1600s， OK， 所以是先讲18， 然后再讲 hundreds like that。Okay. According to legend, it was discovered by a traveling merchant.
According to 的意思呢，就是根据什么的记载。好，我们根据有一个传说，那个记载是这么说的。It 当然就是指我们刚才讲的这个爱玉冻呢，它被发现的时间呢，被发现的这个人是一个旅行的一个商人。Merchant 这个字就是当时我们讲买卖东西的商人。
Right, and merchants usually have to do with trade, sometimes with foreign countries, but usually merchants, they travel around to sell their products. Okay? He was passing through嘉义 on a hot summer's day.
这一天呢，这个商人呢正好经过，所以同学你可以看到 was 后面加了 ing， 因为他强调的是过去的那一个时刻，他正好做的一件事情。他刚好经过了这个嘉义这个地方，然后那一天呢又是非常炎热的一个夏天。
Right, so here the word through, it really does change the way that someone pictures this sentence. If I took out the word through and said he was passing Chiayi on a hot summer's day, it would sound like that this merchant was just walking by or maybe just driving by. He didn't stop in Chiayi or go through Chiayi. But if you say that he was passing through Chiayi, it sounds like that he actually went into the city or went into that area and actually was physically within that area.
对，没错，这个 through 的这个介意词加上去呢，就是感觉到说你是真的有进入到嘉义这个地方里面去一探究竟，而不是只是就是这样经过它了。
And as an American, if I saw how we spell 嘉义, I might pronounce it chai.
这是英式的美国的发音方式是这样。
Right, so if you meet a foreigner, a Westerner who says chai, just know that he's trying to say 嘉义. Okay? The weather was so hot that he went to the river to cool down.
嘉义真的是温度非常非常的高，尤其在夏天的时候。他说因为太热了 ，so that 就是如此的热，以至于呢，他只好怎么办呢？怎么样让自己凉爽一点呢？他就去到河边了，想说，去这个凉凉的河水里面来浸泡一下，可以让自己呢来舒服凉爽一下。
Right, so here we say the weather was so hot that he 怎么样怎么样 is because 热到他就必须要做这件事情。Okay, it was so hot that he went to the river to cool down. And here we see cool down again, which we learned in yesterday's lesson. It means to let your body temperature get lower,
没错。
and you're not sweating so much. Okay? When he got there, the man thought he saw some ice floating in the water.
当这个商人呢 got there 就是到达那个河边的时候呢，他以为啊，他看见了什么东西呢？他看到了一些冰 floating。同学，你前面不是有看见这个字吗？所以我正好看见它在那边飘飘飘，所以这时候这个 float 就加了 ing 了。In the water 不能用 on 呢 ，on 就是漂浮在这个上面，有没有？所以它是有点接触到水里面的，所以它介词用的是 in， 就他看见呢水中呢飘着这些东西，好像是以为是冰这样子。
So the preposition is so important. It really helps the person, the listener, know exactly the location of the ice that's in the water or on the water.
对。
Okay? So float, F-L-O-A-T, this could also be a word, a verb to talk about something that is in the air. Okay, so maybe there is a leaf floating in the air.
漂浮的意思。
Right, so water or in the air. He picked up a piece and realized that it wasn't ice at all. It was jelly.
好，所以他以为是冰，对不对？所以他就过去把它捡起来一块，a piece。因为我们讲这个 ice 是不可数的，所以他就捡起来一块这个冰，以为的冰。好，结果呢才了解到，才发觉怎么样呢？不是冰 at all，not at all， 就一点都不是的意思，表示它根本就不是冰原来是 jelly， 原来是这个果冻。
Right, so here we have an M dash, 就是那个长长的线，然后再加 it was jelly. 那其实这个 it was M dash 的后面的部分呢 is usually just additional information. 那只是多余的一些资料。
没错。
然后其实我可以直接就是 he picked up a piece and realized that it wasn't ice at all, and it was actually jelly 之类的。但是 M dash 只是一种方式，就是停下来，然后就是多解释一下前面到底这个冰它是什么东西。对 ，it was jelly， 它是一种果冻。
对，所以同学呢，你们可以多用这些标点符号，在写作的时候呢，可以让你的这整篇文章更增加不同的一些感觉，尤其对于读者来讲。所以你看，像刚刚 Stephen 老师讲的，他后面多用了一个 it was jelly， 就是有点在多余的再去解释、再去叙述前面他捡到的这个东西，其实并不是冰，而是 jelly。
没有错。然后我觉得这个 M dash 就是如果我在阅读的时候呢，我刚刚在念的时候，其实我有停下来，我 in that it wasn't ice at all, it was jelly。其实会让阅读那个听者会知道你要多给一些资讯，
没错，
对不对？然后看的时候看到一个 M dash， 你自然就知道后面的部分都是给多的一些 additional information。Okay, all right, let's take a short break.
好的。
The man noticed that the jelly was forming under a fig plant near the river.
好啦，这个商人呢就注意到一件事情了。注意到什么事呢？他用这个 that 这个名词子句放在 notice 的后面，当做它的受词。他说，其实这个果冻呢 was forming， 就是它当时就变成这个形状。form 就是当动词成型的意思。它为什么会呈现这个果冻的这个形状呢？就是因为它刚好在一个under 在什么的下面 a fig plant， 就是我们刚刚讲这个无花果的这个植物的下方就成了这样的一个形状。
Right, so here we see two separate places where there's a preposition and where the location is of a certain thing. Under a fig plant, near the river. Okay, these are very, very important words to know. It's just kind of giving the listener or the reader an idea of the location of what they're talking about. Okay? He found that the jelly formed when fig seeds fell into the river's cold water.
那到底这个东西是怎么成型的呢？他发现到了，就是这个果冻呢，如果呢它怎么样 formed， 它成型的时候是当这个 fig seeds， 就是这个无花果的种子，如果掉入了这些冷冷的海水里面的时候，它那个形状就出现了。
The merchant decided to bring some figs home with him.
因为很特殊的一个景象嘛，所以这个商人就决定了 decided to， 就是决定要去做这件事情。他就把一些的这些无花果的种子呢，跟着他一起把它带回家了。
Right, so you can decide to do something, 就是决定来做某一件事情。
对。
Like tonight, I am deciding to cook dinner. Okay.
他今天要自己做晚餐，我也要吃。
Well, I'm not a good cook, so that's not a good idea.
It's
but
okay.
Decide to do something 就是决定来做某一件事情。So he's deciding to bring some figs home with him. So bring something home with you. It means 就是把某一个东西带回家。Okay. He showed them to his daughter. 爱玉 and together they made the jelly.
听到这大概同学就知道了，对不对？那这个爸爸呢，就把这样的一个很奇特的这个无花果的种子呢，就拿给他女儿看。那么这个女儿刚好她的名字就叫爱玉。好，那么一块的，他们就一起来制作这个爱玉的这个果冻了。
And here I kind of want to bring back to what I was talking about with Westerners when they see certain Chinese words that were translated directly to Chinese, such as 差异 and 爱玉. Because when Westerners, when they see these words, they're not going to know the intonations, the 二声三声. So they're going to read it how they see it. Like when they see CHIAYI for 嘉义, they're going to say 差异. Okay? When they see AIYU, some people might read 爱玉, or some people might read 爱玉. Okay? So the reason why I want to bring this up is when you're talking to a Westerner and when they're trying to say, oh, I really like to eat 鱼, 爱玉, you kind of really have to use your imagination to guess what they're trying to say. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult to communicate about certain things. But if you're aware of it, 如果你知道这件事情, it'll be a lot easier for you to make a connection with people when they're not speaking a language that is their native tongue.
对，没错，所以这就是每个地方它的发音，还有这些字啊，还有很多的其他的因素。像我们的中文，因为我们有这个 intonation 很重，有一声、两声、三声、四声，所以像他们看到某一些字，外国人可能没有办法念得那么精准。但是如果我们稍微了解一下他们的这些文化的背景，或者是语言的这样的一个隔阂，就会让我们彼此之间呢会有一个更愉快的相处。
而且我很多的学生们，就是他们每次看到像这种的情况，因为现在这个所有这边讲的东西都是过去式，It's all past tense。但是因为在中文我们没有过去式、未来式，动词不会因为这些情况改变，所以有的时候会很难去一直要提醒自己英文的时候也一直要改变过去式、未来式、现在式。但是你必须要就是很清楚，我现在就在讲一个以前的 legend， 一个传说，一个以前的事情的时候。I need to speak in the past tense. So all my verbs need to be in the past tense, okay? So the man noticed, okay? 那个 ED is noticed, like that. He found, 他找到. He found the jelly formed, okay? 这些一定要过去式，否则的话你的听者会不知道你到底在讲什么时候发生的事情。
对，所以同学，你的故事一开头就是讲它是一个 legend， 所以你的时态要保持一致性。就通通都要用 past tense。
我真的很多学生 they have trouble with this, and I understand because it's not the way that we think in Chinese.
没错。
But unfortunately, with English, you have to first have that mindset. 一定要先有那个概念，把它放在那边。过去式，所有动词都要过去式。如果是那个 sentence 主要的那个动词，过去式。
Yes.
Don't forget. Okay, let's take a short break.
Okay.
It was so tasty that they opened a shop and 爱玉 began selling it.
这个 it 就是指他爸爸呢跟他女儿一块去制作出来这个爱玉冻呢，因为实在太好吃了 ，so that 又出现啦哈，如此以至于呢，爸爸跟女儿就想说，干脆我们就来开一间店，对不对？所以 opened a shop， 然后就由这个女儿爱玉来开始贩卖这样的一个爱玉冻。
Now, this actually has a very similar grammar to something that we talked about earlier in this whole excerpt. Okay, and earlier we said the weather was so hot that he went to the river to cool down. Okay, 所以天气热到他必须要去就是河边，然后 cool down 凉爽一下。那这里呢，我们现在看到这个 ，It was so tasty that they opened a shop and 爱玉 began selling it。就是这个爱玉好吃到。 就是他们就决定要开一个店，然后爱玉就开始卖了这个爱玉 ，right？ 但是你看这个，如果我只是讲 It was so tasty。那这个情况 I'm just saying it was very tasty, right? But it was so tasty that 我们如果这个 so 然后形容词，然后加一个 that 的话，平常的意思就是这个形容词那么的怎么样，所以就必须要做什么什么事情。OK， 所以这是个文法很好用的一个部分，
一个句型。所以同学在写句子的时候，尽量让这个句子保持完整。所以如果你只写到 so tasty，人家读者会觉得那到底多好吃？你后面再用 that 补充说明，好吃到可以开店了啊，人家才会 picture 说哦，对，它真的这么好吃哎。
Let me give you an example. I am so happy. 那这个只是我很开心嘛，对不对？I am so happy because I got a good grade. 我很开心，因为 because 我拿了一个好的分数。
对。
那现在我要用我们刚刚那个的文法。I am so happy that I am going to go shopping.
哇，因为好到太高兴了，所以必须一定要去买点东西了。
对，没有错，所以可以用这个文法来讲，你开心到什么程度？开心到一定要做这个是什么事情 ？OK。Customers loved the jelly, but it was lacking a name.
好，所以当时的 customers 就是这些顾客啦，来店吃这个爱玉的这个东西啊。老板，我要一个。那个黏黏的那个东西啦，好，那这样怎么点餐呢？对不对？因为他太喜欢这个 jelly 了。那当时刚好就是缺了 lack， 就是指缺乏的意思。刚好这个东西就缺了一个名字。
And here we see customer, right? Customer is usually the person who comes to a restaurant or comes to a retail store, like a clothing store, goes to the supermarket. Those are customers. But what's the difference between a customer and a client?
这两个字的不同点呢
？So this is something I always hear within my students. They're not very sure who is a customer, who is a client. Okay, so here's my way of separating them. A customer is usually someone who comes, they spend money at your office or at your business, and it's just like a short-term kind of interaction. But a client is somebody that you usually have to build like a relationship, a business relationship with, and they do business with you long term. Okay, so when you're in an office and you're doing sales, usually the person who buys things from you is your client. Okay, so but if it's someone who's just coming in to buy a meal, just one dinner,That's usually a customer.
对，所以呢，基本上 Stephen 老师他的分的方式就是说呢，一个是比较长期合作的，好，那你常常跟他有一些活动互动的时候，这时候他就是你的 client， 我们中文就把它翻成这是你的客户，好，那它是长期的一个合作。那如果只是今天短暂的啊，比如说你卖一个东西，那我就去买了一个东西，可能一次性的消费，或者当然也可能有好几次的消费，但它都是一个短暂性的一个互动，那这时候我们就称之为他就是一个消费者，他是一个顾客。
And here, let's go back to the word lacking. Okay, that means like to either not have enough of or not have at all. Okay, so this food is really lacking flavor. Okay, 就是这个食物就是真的
没什么味道，
没有什么味道，
对
right? Okay, so lacking something 就是缺少或完全没有那个东西。So they decided to name it after the girl who sold it to them.
对，因为每天呢都是由这个女儿在卖这个东西啦，所以呢 they 当然就是这些 customers， 这些顾客就决定，好啦，我们总不能每一次都说老板我要那个黏黏的东西所以他们决定来以什么命名name something after 什么东西，好啦，他们就决定把这个爱玉呢，这个黏黏的东西呢，用这个女孩爱玉的名字来作为命名。这个女孩是谁呢？ Who sold it to them， 就是把这个爱玉卖给这些顾客的这个女孩。
Very nicely said. And that is how 爱玉 jelly got its name.
所以这个就是爱玉冻名字的由来。我们亚洲中国人蛮多这个东西，像什么东坡肉啊。就是用苏东坡的名字取的名字，对对，所以那个肉叫东坡肉。麻婆豆腐也是
I never knew that.
对，麻婆豆腐，如果老师没有记错这个历史的话哈，就是以前有一个叫陈麻婆的一个厨师，因为他脸上长了很多麻子，所以人家叫他陈麻婆。他豆腐煮得非常的好吃，所以大家就叫麻婆豆腐。所以我们中国人很喜欢用名字来帮食物取名字。西方有没有这样子
The history of food. I'm sure there is. Yeah, I'm sure there is for every culture and every history.
对，没错。
Now I'm just hungry. Okay, let's do the review section.
Okay.
All right, Bernice 老师, what does it mean when I say according to legend?
根据传说。
So 根据是 according to and legend 就是传说。Okay, so this 爱玉 jelly was discovered by a traveling merchant. So what is discovered mean?
Discover 通常我们是讲发现没有错，可是它通常是第一次，以前人家都没有发现到，然后被你给发现到了。好，那 merchant 的话就是当时呢买卖东西的商人。
And when I say that ice is floating on the water versus ice is floating in the water, what's the difference?
首先 float 是指飘来飘去的这个动作 OK， 那有 in 跟 on 的不同。 on 的话就是在这个水面上面这样子飘着。好，那如果 in 的话它是有接触到这个水，可能在水的下方也会有这样的一个东西。对。
Correct. All right, so when I say that the jelly was forming under the fig tree, what does it mean by forming?
对 form 就是一个东西它把它塑造一个形状出来，塑形。
And people who really like to eat 爱玉 jelly, they are customers who come to the shop. So who are the customers?
对，就是通常我们讲短暂性的单次的这样的一个消费的这个顾客，我们就用到 customer。
Versus a client who is
比较
the
长期的客户。
客户. And this 爱玉 jelly, before they named it 爱玉 jelly, they didn't know what to call it. It was lacking a name.
对 lack 就是缺乏，或者我们讲这个东西不足够，我们就会用到这个字。
Right, so actually, if someone asked you, oh, do you like it? Does it taste good? About a food, you could actually just reply to them one word. It's lacking.
对，就是好像少了些什么东西。
Yeah.
对
So you can say that as well. And they didn't know what to call this jelly, so because the girl who sold it was named 爱玉, they named the jelly after 爱玉. So what does that mean?
Name after 就是以什么来作为命名的意思。
All right, and that concludes our excerpt for today. I learned a lot about 爱玉 and the history of a dessert that I really enjoy. Okay, and
太棒了。
we'll see you guys next time.
OK， 拜拜。
第54页，发现台湾国民美食爱玉的缘起。
The juicy story behind Taiwan's favorite jelly. People in Taiwan began making Aiyu jelly in the early 1800s. According to legend, it was discovered by a traveling merchant. He was passing through Jiayi on a hot summer's day. The weather was so hot that he went to the river to cool down. When he got there, the man thought he saw some ice floating in the water. He picked up a piece and realized that it wasn't ice at all. It was jelly. The man noticed that the jelly was forming under a fig plant near the river. He found that the jelly formed when fig seeds fell into the river's cold water. The merchant decided to bring some figs home with him. He showed them to his daughter, Aiyu, and together they made the jelly. It was so tasty that they opened a shop, and Aiyu began selling it. Customers loved the jelly, but it was lacking a name. So they decided to name it after the girl who sold it to them. And that is how Aiyu jelly got its name.